Hello, welcome to this video tutorial by the Phonetic Laboratory in Turin, Italy.
This is a brief demonstration of the segmentation and annotation work I ask students to carry out for the speech analysis module of the Language Technologies and Digital Humanities course. Each student has been assigned a sound file, approximately 1 minute in duration, which can be opened and observed using a speech analysis program, which in our case has been identified in the well-known Praat software, created and distributed by researchers at the Institute of Phonetics in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. The main graphs we will observe in the software's graphic window are dynamic representations of the waveform, the spectrogram, and a representation of the pitch contour that is based on F0 measurements. For an accurate inspection of these curves, there are selection and deselection modes entrusted to a number of buttons and commands that allow the listening and/or a specific processing of the limited portions of the recording. Regarding the aspects related to the visualization of these graphs and the interactive use of the software to perform measurements or surveys of acoustic variables and create annotation tiers, students who will be using this software are asked to refer to its user manual and the video tutorials available on the LFSAG YouTube channel. The labeling of speech materials can be done in various ways and with varying depth of analysis. Some annotation levels can be very specific in terms of segmental analysis. In some cases, there is a need to delve into the difficult task of phonological representation, which is made especially arduous for those language varieties whose phonology is not precisely known. Or in other cases, detailing information on the phonetic properties of a given sound with indications that take into account the acoustic indices present at particular phases of its realization, generally setting, the hold, and decay phases. Conversely, it may be interesting to work at the word level, taking into account phonosyntactic phenomena, accentuation hierarchies, or tonal sandhi phenomena related to the ways in which phonological words are organized within intermediate phrases, tonal and intonation units, of which utterances are composed. For all these different levels of analysis, I invite you to consult the documents provided during the course. For the purposes of this practical activity, the objective we set ourselves is to learn to delimit on a first level the graphic units, graphic words, reflecting, above all, on these cases in which a lexical composition takes place and can be rendered graphically according to certain conventions. The first annotation tier is what we will refer to as WRD, word. Here, as will be seen, it is particularly important to learn to recognize and classify the acoustic indices that determine speech boundaries. This can generally be traced back to the acoustic events that define the initial and final sounds. In the case of continuous sounds, such as nasal or fricative sounds, voiceless or voiced, or momentary sounds with more or less bursting release phases, such as plosive or affricate sounds, it is indeed necessary to learn to identify or otherwise conventionally signal the initial or final moment of these sounds on the basis of the harmonic or noisy components that distinguish them. In the case of vowel sounds, or for those consonant sounds that are characterized by evident harmonic components, the question often arises as to the more or less abrupt or gradual manner in which the setting or decay of the sound occurs, because glottalization phenomena may appear in these phases, or cancellation or insertion phenomena may occur. In the former case, a glottal stop, for example, may occur regularly or occasionally, and we need to decide what importance to give to this phenomenon. In our case, in addition to the traditional graphic form of a word affected by this phenomenon, we could add plus question mark at the beginning or end if the word is delimited by such phenomena. If, on the contrary, the word should begin or end with the addition of unexpected vowel elements, we consider the possibility of inserting an additional plus at mark. At an approximately constant speech rate, around 4-5 syllables per second, these sounds, in context of beginning, or more often, end of the utterance units, acquire perceptual relevance, especially when they exceed a duration of 25 milliseconds. In the case of hesitation, these sounds, as well as generally all the sounds at the beginning or end of a speech chain, may be subject to lengthening through degraded quality phases on the timbre, voice, or loudness level. These facts occurring at the word level, considering the initial and final elements of an utterance unit, constitute an element of evaluation that must be also taken into account at a second level of notation, in which we indicate the scansion of the spoken text, labeling the interposal unit with the graphic form normally used in spelling and corresponding to the text segment included in that interval. We will conventionally indicate this level of annotation as UTT, utterance. An important warning. An evaluation element that is usually taken into account when setting the grade for the final examination is the presence of boundaries, for example delimiting segmented units, that coincide perfectly between one level and another. This implies that the operator has inserted the boundaries in perfect correspondence between one level and the next, with a propagation technique which does not require the insertion of a new boundary, but the extension of the boundary inserted on the previously labeled tier. Another element that allows one to appreciate the care with which the work is carried out is the presence of a single boundary at a given point, and not two or three that have been inadvertently inserted and may not be distinct because they are too close together. So, in order to label the separation intervals between one utterance and another, we will see that labels can be used that roughly define the type of interruption or pause that occurs. Apart from lengthenings, we will therefore limit ourselves to noting phenomena such as in-breathings, that is, inspirations, or silent pauses. We will then identify and annotate short pauses, which are the most common in this type of data, or long pauses. These are possible, for instance, in the case of the start of the recording being considerably earlier than the start of the linguistic production. Another type of pause worth considering is an extra short pause that occurs in the vicinity of breaking phenomena between intonation units by means of laryngealization. In colloquial or media speech data, it is also possible to record so-called reset pauses, which are pauses that conclude a certain discourse and precede the beginning of a discourse that develops on a text completely disconnected from the previous one. Having said this in general terms, let us see now how to proceed practically. The sound file must be opened using the commands allowed by the software and the operating system. Once opened, the file appears in the list of objects listed in the software's data management window. By selecting it, it is possible to display the curves associated with it in the graphic window using the View and Edit button. However, to produce the annotation, it is necessary to proceed differently. By selecting the sound object, it is in fact possible to click on the Annotate button and then continue with to text grid. In the space All Tier Names, simply write WRD, but there must also be nothing in the space below. Once the text grid has been created, it appears in the object list. We must select the sound and the text grid together and click on View and Edit to see the interactive graphic window in which there is a text space, a tier below the graphs in which it is possible to write. You can locate the temporal extent of the interval you wish to label for the duration of the lexical unit you wish to write, by delimiting it in the spectrogram by clicking and dragging and then pressing the Enter key. Or you can place two separate boundaries separately, the first at the beginning of the interval you wish to label and the other at the end. Clicking on the spectrogram at the point where the start of the interval is to be fixed displays a temporary boundary in the annotation tier at the bottom with a clickable small circle. Clicking inside the small circle fixes the first boundary on the left. By clicking at the point where the interval is to be delimited to the right, another temporary marker appears, and clicking in the bottom circle also fixes this one. Clicking inside the interval between two boundaries allows you to indicate the content of that interval. By writing the word with the characters available from the keyboard, or pasting a graphic form generated with other fonts into a separate editing sheet. You can proceed word by word on the first tier, adding any pauses and/or inspirations, and finally save the work done with Ctrl+S. Once you have completed the WRD tier, you can duplicate it, generating a second tier at a lower level, which we call UTT, and which will contain only intervals between pauses or other interruptions that enclose text corresponding to the sequence of words included in that utterance unit, and concluded with punctuation marks if necessary. Once this other tier is completed, you must save, again Ctrl+S, and deliver the produced text grid. Thank you for your attention.